You directed 401, and I keep coming back to Ulster's reintroduction, specifically the prison escape. What were the conversations like around staging that violence, especially the level of blood and how far it needed to go to reestablish how dangerous Ulster is?
We'd seen the effects of Ulster being violent, like we've seen women's mouths sewn. So but we've never seen him actually be actively violent.
Mm-hmm.
So it was kind of important for us for the first time to show how dark that man can get, how violent he can be. Because again, we've never seen his rage. And so speaking of rage, that was like a theme that we wanted to explore this season as a whole. Will's rage, and actually in the premiere, Ulster's rage, that also goes into the second episode. And so much so that like I started a whole lens language of how to shoot rage, because it was really going to be a theme for us the whole season as a whole, sort of exploring Will unraveling. It was a fun thing that we got to do, which is I kind of wanted to mirror when we saw Will and Ulster angry, to sort of show that connection that they have, because they are connected.
Get out of my head!
Ulster, had a relationship with Lucy, and that ended tragically. And so one of the few people that Will knows, has a tie to his mother. And so it was a great conversation I had with Liz, Dan, Karine, and also the DP as we started like act one of the season premiere, which is so fun, was like we want to catch up with our heroes and they're outside in the world, and everything kind of felt pretty positive and hopeful. Angie setting up her nursery with Scott Foley, Ormwood's in chemo, and we added some levity to that scene. Meanwhile, juxtaposing that with this sense of like looming danger, like a shark. And we wanted it to feel really sort of sharp when he turns and he goes violent. And we wanted to see how violent he got, so that it even shocked the young man that he had sort of manipulated and got him to be a part of this with. And so it was a really fun sort of language that we was able to create for that whole premiere. And then the other thing that was very exciting was, we always do reconstructions on our show. How do you keep reinventing it and making it feel fresh and new? And I thought this one, which was incredibly technical, it wasn't written on the page, and I had pitched it to them. I said, I read the scene, I go, how fun would it be if we showed this in reverse, what happened in Will's mind, and then we see what really happened when we show that it was Ulster that had killed all these people. That got everyone excited, the crew, because we had to bring in special equipment for certain shots where things are happening backwards, but I'm walking forward. And it's funny, you start talking about it and people's heads started spinning like, wait a minute, that person died, then this person, but we're doing it in reverse order now. So now we have to, but it was really effective, I thought, and a really exciting way to sort of show not only Will's, the skill that we've shown he uses, but also to infuse Ulster in that, sort of constantly poking and prodding and messing with him.
Killer's gonna kill.
Which is something that obviously continues for the first two seasons and onward, actually.
Will comes dangerously close to crossing a moral line with Ulster. He even says he would have killed him. If Will had actually had that chance, do you think he could have gone through with it?
I'd like to say no, but you just never know with someone's situation and circumstance and where they're at. I mean, like you said, he's somebody that has always sort of held his moral compass high and to do the right thing. But I feel like we're starting to see him being pushed as he's finally, for the first time, really looking inside. He's having therapy. As unconventional as these sessions may be with pickleball, and we'll have others, which I love. Like, it's such a fun way, as opposed to a typical sit down. We've done that in previous seasons, and Will would chew those therapists up and spit them out and go, that's basic, please. And then you have Dr. Roach, who's like, we're going to get you out of your head and into your body. We're going to go play some pickleball. And then I'm going to poke at you while we're playing and seeing how you respond. But with that comes a lot of stuff. Things get kicked up. There might be some progress that he makes with maybe some things that she shines a light on or gives him a perspective on. And then there's going to be things that are going to be really upsetting and that are really going to sort of trigger other emotions in him. And so it's a really fun way to start the season. And it's a fun color that we don't often get to see on Will, but would Will actually kill him? I think we're going to see that get tested for sure.
At the end of 402, we hear Caleb say that he hopes Ulster's death brings Will relief. But Will answers, the world's a safer place. He doesn't really get into the personal aspect of Ulster's death. From your perspective, why is Will unable or unwilling to frame that moment in personal terms?
I think because for Will, this is something that's very much unresolved. I mean, this is someone that, and is also very complicated. Ulster dies saving Will. Like, that's just a loaded, complicated thing for Will to try to process and digest. The man that killed his mother, that he hates and arrested, we almost saw him kill him seasons ago when he had the gun on him. So it's like Will's been put right up to the line on that. And I think, for Will, if anything, back to your original question, actually, like he'd rather he had killed him than be saved by this man, and feel like almost indebted to him, which is even a worse feeling. And so I think he's not really able to fully process it. It's very loaded. But what I do love about that final scene between Will and Caleb, and it's those things that I love that we do and other great shows and films do as well, where sometimes you need to say less and less is more. And just seeing them in the room together, and Will inviting him for a cup of coffee, which is so simple of a gesture, but it's kind of like the first time we're seeing him extend anything towards Caleb and potentially willing to explore whatever possible future might be, which is hard for Will, but whatever that might be for these two characters.
As the season unfolds, Will's inner life really seems to hinge on two relationships, with his newly discovered biological father, Caleb, and with Angie. Let's start with Caleb. Will has spent his entire life without a father, and now he's suddenly confronted by one who's present, protective, and deeply opinionated. From your perspective, what is hardest for Will about letting Caleb into his life, and where does that relationship push him in ways he's not used to being pushed?
A lot of third relationship, because it's important, is Will with himself. And that's a very, very deep relationship that maybe he has the least he's got that least connection with. He's not someone that's tending to go inside and explore, and he's just beginning that process. But with Caleb, the thing that's hard for someone like Will, who did not have a father, who didn't really have any information as to who this man was, or if he was even alive, their first interaction is conflict.
Oh, business. Okay, my kind of guy.
There's like a turf war, and they're very strong-headed both. And so that already sets off like, okay, I don't like you, you don't like me. I'm not sure what's going on here. And then to find out that that person is your father is kind of takes the rug right up under Will.
Sheriff Caleb Broussard is your father.
No, he's not.
And then we saw glimpses of like similarities that they had, which shows like, I love that because it kind of proves DNA and how real it is and how you can pass things on to someone, even though you've never been in their life, which is just fascinating. But I think for Will, he's like, wait a minute, you're my father, you're alive. You've been in Atlanta the whole time. You've got this wonderful, healthy family. Like, not only does he feel like he missed out on, but it's like, why didn't you come find me? He's just got so many questions. There's so many things that are unanswered. And I think it's just hard for Will to sit at a dining table with Caleb's family and not feel like, what if? Why did I not deserve to be found or searched after? What could have been? Look at this life that these kids are having versus the life that Will had to live in foster care, in the children's home, the trauma, the abuse. All of that gets kicked up as he sees the life that Caleb has created for his family and kind of what Will didn't get. So it's a tough pill for him to kind of swallow and to really accept what this relationship might be, might or might not be. It's just, I think, a very complicated, real scenario for someone like Will who didn't have that, to just accept someone and go, oh, right, this is my new family. Yeah, we haven't seen each other, but this should be, really perfect. It's a hard thing for someone like Will who's been so deeply traumatized and longing for something like that, for it to sort of appear and not make him ask so many questions about what happened.
Our conversations almost always come back to Will and Angie. And I found it really refreshing that the show is actually exploring what it means for them to be apart, whereas a lot of shows might have worked or rushed towards a reconciliation by the end of season 3. Right. There's a moment in the premiere that really stuck with me when Will acknowledges Angie's engagement and tells her he's happy for her.
Happy for you, Angie.
And I don't think he's lying. What was your read on that moment, and what do you think Will makes of Angie's growth since their breakup?
Will is happy. You know, there's a part of him that to see Angie achieve something that they separately hadn't been able to, or together have been able to figure out, he knows how important it is and what it means to people like them to have a family. And she's got a healthy man who cares about her and loves her, and now she's having a family. She's having a child. And so obviously there's a part of Will that wished that that could have been the fantasy that he fulfilled, that he always wanted, the dining table in Will's house and what that represented, you know. But I think at the same time, what's fun, and I'm grateful, like our writers don't run to try to have these two just figure it out and be back together, or, you know, it's a complicated, and it feels kind of closer to real life of two people that care a lot about each other, but are now having to be forced to move on from one another. And how do you do that? You know, and especially, it's not like you can just avoid her. They work right by each other and often together. And so it makes for great TV drama. It makes for, you know, you might root for them to get back, or you might be happy that they're separated and learning how to navigate these new waters apart. Can they be friends? You know, so a lot of that stuff that you're bringing up is stuff that we definitely explore and we get into the season. But I just like that we don't button it up perfectly or simply. It stays complicated and it stays gray, where we're watching these two people try to figure it out as best they can. In the episode last season, when Will's in the room with her, with the doctor, and they hear the heartbeat for the first time. I mean, my heart broke for that guy and her. He wasn't going to leave her, you know, and he stood by her and he stayed there. And I don't know, they're so deeply interesting, and I find them so human about how they show up for each other despite what could have been, or whatever fantasies each of them had. But I think Will is, you know, I like that we've sort of colored him and brought him on this journey of trying to find, you know, expressing that he's happy for her and trying to find a way to navigate it as best as possible.
Do you think that they can still be emotional anchors for one another without their lives being so enmeshed?
It's tricky. I mean, I think it depends. You know, I think sometimes you can fall into old habits, and that can be really dangerous. I think, again, because of all the trauma each of them have shared separately and with each other, it's very tricky and loaded. So you kind of probably have to tread a little lightly and careful in those scenarios of like, how close can we get before we just get wrapped up and do what we've always done? You know, and especially now with a very new situation. You know, Angie is in a new relationship with a baby. She's starting a family. So I don't think, you know, Will would ever want to like destroy that intentionally or try to do anything to harm that. And, you know, the good news is, I will say, is, you know, there may be some new romances in the season, and there may be some old romances in the season. And so it'll be fun, I think, for audiences to sort of go along on the ride and kind of see where things end up. I'm curious because we're in the middle of shooting. You know, we're on episode 12 of 18. So we're on the last third of the season. And but I think all that kind of fun, it's fun. We just want to make it interesting and fun for audiences to kind of keep cheering along.